Hello, I'm Dr. Matthew Imber from Alat Natural Healthcare. I want to take a minute to talk to you about balance. Balance is controlled by three different parts of our brain: the visual system, the vestibular system. Now, if you see my video on vertigo, I go into a little bit more in depth of how the vestibular system works and what it is. But basically, it's real short, it lets us know where we are in space as we're moving. So if I'm moving forward, back, side to side, up in an elevator, it fires off to let our brain know which direction we're moving. The third part is known as the cerebellum. Cerebellum is involved in more than just balance. It's involved in speech, it's involved in thought, attention, expression, learned motor movements, like tying your shoes. The first time you tied your shoes, it was probably pretty hard. After that, you were able to do it quicker and quicker and quicker, until eventually you didn't have to think about it when you did it. That process is stored in the cerebellum. It also is responsible for fine motor movements in the sense that if you ever look down at your hands and notice there's a slight tremor or a little bit of a shake, especially in one hand more than the other, that's called the resting tremor or an essential tremor. And that's actually due to breakdowns in different parts of the cerebellum. But today we're going to focus just on the balance aspect of the cerebellum. And the cerebellum lets us know where we are in space. It lets me know if I'm leaning off to the left, if I'm leaning back, off to the right, and so on. Now, say at your cerebellum, you have two different sides. You have a left and a right. And if we were leaned off to the right, that right cerebellum's firing a little bit higher. If we lean off to the left, that left cerebellum fires a little bit higher. Now, this is all great and exactly how it's supposed to work. The problem happens when one side of the cerebellum is firing a little bit less than the other side. Now, this can happen with injury to one side of our body, overuse. Even different antibodies will attack different types of cerebellar tissue based on different autoimmune diseases. So, when we assess the cerebellum and see that one side's firing higher than the other, what we'll see with that, let's say for example, my right cerebellum is decreased compared to my left. So my left is firing higher even when I'm standing in the middle. When I'm standing up straight, the left's still firing higher. So what that's telling my brain is that I'm actually leaning off to the left, even though I'm standing still. So if I close my eyes and I take the visual system out of the balance equation, then my body is going to think that I am drifting off to the left. So what it's going to do is it's going to slowly drift right and then snap back. Slowly drift right, because I think that when I drift right, I'm bringing this up, so I think I'm standing still, but right when I get too far, then my body realizes I'm falling and it snaps back. Now that works good most of the time. As it breaks down more and more and more, we get farther and farther and farther with that lean before we snap back. Now, this is where falls can happen very easily. And falls become very dangerous, especially as we age. The number one cause of non-fatal injuries and fatal injuries in adults was falls. And fall percentages increase every year. So we need to make sure that not only our balance is good for getting around, but to prevent further injury and damage. Balance is something that rarely just gets better on its own. If we do just general stuff and we're just trying to increase our balance, that can be very helpful and good, but if that deficit exists, if one side of the cerebellum is weaker than the other side, then no amount of balance work is going to make us ever be even in that direction unless we're applying it specifically to one side versus the other. Now, to do this, we basically have to assess what side of the cerebellum is weaker than the other side of the cerebellum. And we can do this through a lot of ways. One way is just observing, like we talked about before, that drift to one side or the other. Or even comparing dexterity in one hand versus the other. Even tone on each side of the body is controlled by either of those cerebellum. After we know which one's weak, we have to do specific exercises for that side of the cerebellum. So if you're like this, and we just do general balance cerebellar exercises, all you're going to do is do this. We need to do this. Make them balanced and even so that when your brain thinks you're standing still, you actually are standing still and not drifting to one side or the other side, increasing your chances to fall.